Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we're all in different time zones. I'm Justine Reichman, your host at Essential Ingredients, and today I am so honored to have with me Donna Pace. Welcome, Donna. How are you?
Hey, Justine, really good to be on your wonderful show. What an honor.
Oh,
All
it's
the
an
way
honor for me.
from Palma de Mallorca, Spain.
Yes, you are far away from me. I'm here in Northern California, and I wish I could see Mallorca, Spain. Right now. But Donna, thank you so much for joining me. I know that it is quite late there for you, but for our audience here, some of them are new to you. So I'd love for you to just take a minute and introduce yourself.
Well, what to say? I think I'll just start by saying that my name and surname means the woman of peace. So that really determines who I am. Donna Pace in Italiano, that's what it means, the woman of peace. So that is a name I carry very proudly. As you know, because we've already coincided in our own professional interests, I run a consultancy and a training organization, and we essentially dedicate our time and energy to creativity, innovation, future trends, and value decoding and leadership. But what I can say about myself is that I'm an agent provocateur. I'm a nonconformist. That when I was 15 years old, I was really inspired to be a missionary nun. That's what I wanted to be. I
Wow.
really grappled with, the calling of God. I really felt that I was being called to give up my life as a normal young woman of my time and just, really concentrate on following the call of God to be a missionary. I suppose I turned that calling into something else because I still feel like I'm out on a mission, and I still feel as if I'm on a sort of missionary drive. But that, in a nutshell, is who I am. I think I'm somebody who enjoys waking people up. I'm somebody who enjoys exploration and discovery. And I would say that if I had to make you privy of what my main values are, because I think this really determines what kind of person one is. When you know where your values are and what you stand for, I would say that my number one value is probably freedom. My second value would probably be creativity. And my third important value would probably be coherence. So I have many more, but anyway, in a nutshell, this is who I am.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Donna. I really appreciate that. And I think our listeners are going to love this because it's a little bit of a detour from what our ordinary conversations are about, but equally important, because so often we're talking about how to change the future of food. And today we're really talking about how to support these food businesses on their mission to build a more sustainable and regenerative business. And the only way I know how to do that is to support them with building a business that is really about looking inwards and dealing with and building strong sense of person with the skills that you are so well versed at helping them develop. So with that said, I'd love for us to just talk about some of these systems that you've developed and that you help these teams and individuals really work on. And some of them are communication systems, I think, and different languages that they can really work on. So let's start with the current communication system that many people are working with today, and then maybe dive into some of the tools that you might recommend. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, as I was contemplating and preparing for your podcast today, Justine, I remembered that only this week I came across a quote by Henry Kissinger that said, "He who controls food controls people. He who controls energy controls countries. And he who controls money controls the world." And I thought, that's a very interesting quote. I think I'll take it with me to Justine's podcast, because I think it's relevant. What you are doing in the world of food awareness and food consciousness is so detrimental to the very metamorphosis and transformation of the societies we're living in today and the ones we're going to be living in tomorrow. So, I think the essence of this quotation is that since we're at this crossroads, I know we've spoken about this before. I think, I'm notwithstanding that I'm not in the food industry, the food industry as a more metaphorical topic is really something that is either going to push us down or push us up. I think it's a do or die situation. So what you're doing is really tremendously relevant. I've seen some of the marvelous videos you put up, and I think that you are driving this change from the food point of view, and the food point of view is key. So coming back to my systems and coming back to the idea of communication. I mean, whether you're in food, whether you're in the catering industry, whatever industry you're
Whatever industry it is.
Communication is something that can either make or break anything. It's a deal breaker. Communication is the deal breaker. So this is my area of expertise. I think really today, one of the greatest problems with the idea of communication is that we still haven't learned 2,400 years down the line, and I'll tell you why I'm saying 2,400 years, why it is that, for example, my third value is coherence, because the idea of being precise and being objective with the way you communicate is absolutely key, because otherwise you are in the danger zone of errors of perception. So while we need new communication, or at least we need some form of a 21st century language, as I call it, to be able to communicate in a way which is clear, which is precise, which is respectful, which is tolerant, which bothers to take time to interpret properly, there are three main areas really why we need this kind of communication tool. And the tools I use are obviously very hardcore skills, but there's a why and wherefore. And the why and wherefore is, one, we haven't really changed our thinking patterns for the past 2,400 years. And that's why I mentioned that number of time. It's a long stretch of time, because all our mental hardware in the West is based on three Greek philosophers. And those three Greek philosophers are Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. All our thinking, you just look back and you say, oh yeah, I see it, I see the pattern. Socrates brings us the value of debate and argument. And to debate an argument, you need to be in a position where you're able to defend truth or untruths, and that's Platonic. That's what Plato brings us. Plato brings us the value of truth thinking. So if this is a pen, it's obviously not a phone.
Right.
So the truth is that this is a pen, and therefore now I can have an argument. I can debate this, the whys and wherefores. And then there's the logic of Aristotle that says that if this is inside, it cannot be outside, which says that if you belong to one race, then you don't belong to another. The logic is very, very straightforward. It's what keeps us in box thinking, right?
Right.
Now, the thing is that the question of truth, and that's a really hot subject right now, is very subjective. Truth is subjective. And therefore, if that is the first starting point, and I am starting with a subjective idea of truth, then my communication, my logic, and everything I communicate to you is likely to be rocky, even though I can really die for it, because truth is usually subjective. So when one understands that in communication, there are many patterns and many ideas to keep in mind, then you're more careful when you communicate. When I write a message, I try to clarify and make sure that I'm not assuming I know something that maybe I don't, that I am not taking for granted that the other knows and perhaps they don't. And this happens in our communication all the time. I have seen companies, lose a lot of money because they have made wrong assumptions. And wrong assumptions means not clarifying and not looking for that coherence in terms of making sure that all the dots all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed because they're in a hurry, right?
Mhm.
So that's one of the reasons why we need to perfect our communication skills, because we're all using a basic hardware which is working on something which I call Ebne, or rather Edward de Bono calls Ebne, who's my friend, mentor, the person who taught me everything I really wanted to know about creativity in the beginning. Ebne means excellent but not enough. It's an acronym. It's fun playing with acronyms. So in terms of communication, there are many reasons why we need to upgrade our perfection of communications. This is one of them.
I also
Another,
think, just to throw out there, that communication is different depending on the medium.
yeah,
So often, right, you ever get emails and people start like halfway through their thought, or they forget to make a salutation and they just start there and you're like, well, where did this come out from? It came out of left field. They think they're having this conversation with you and you're not quite on the same page. People forget that, they're already there, but you're not quite caught up.
that's
And
it.
I think that creates confusion sometimes.
It often creates confusion, and because we're polite and respectful, we don't say, "Hey, what do you mean exactly by this?" Even
Right.
in terms, even I think very often we get lost in translation, right?
Mhm.
We get lost in translation because somebody may be communicating something perfectly innocent, because from where they're coming from, it's perfectly innocent. They're being candid.
Right.
And the other person, because this is the second reason why we need to really upgrade our communication skills, the other person has made an error of perception. Now, errors of perception, Justine, account for 90% of our errors in thinking. Errors of perception. So this means, and this is a study that came out of Harvard in the late 70s, it started from there. It means that very often, apart from our, very great way of being to be able to say this is a phone or this is a pen, we are vulnerable. Our Achilles heel is misinterpreting where the other person is coming from.
Right.
So on the one hand is what you've just said. Somebody sends something and you're wondering, hey, it's like an ambush,
Right.
and then there's the other side of it, that you've offered something perfectly, perfectly innocent or perfectly candid, and the other has interpreted something because of baggage, because of perhaps a bad day, or perhaps because somebody said something about you, but you didn't know, that all of a sudden the perception is warped. So being aware that errors of perception are 90% the reason why very often there's this mismatch in communication.
It's true. It's true. So here's a question. So what's the best way to address that?
Well, there are skill sets that everybody can learn, and then there's something else. There's cognition. It turns out that when you put people together, not everybody has the same preferential cognition. So there are some of us who actually have a preference as a cognition factor for the clarification. They are answering all the questions, the preparing. I wouldn't be surprised if you're a clarifier, because you do a great job with, putting everything in its place, asking the questions, sending things, beforehand. But not everybody's like you. So that
Right.
that tells me that probably it may be a cognition, which is a place where you earn, where you gain energy. This is how you like to do things, or it may have been an acquired skill. So with this communication, you need to take in consideration two things. One, how the brain works. Two, where the errors of our thinkings are, actually three. And three, where that person actually sits in terms of their preferential cognition. So there are four kinds of cognitions, and they're also like a thinking process. In my work, and the work that I'm referring to now is called foresight, and foresight is another great skill set. For as in for, and sight as in sight, foresight. We have been able to establish that people have four kinds of cognition, preferential cognitions. One of them is clarification. So these are the people who are always asking questions, probably like you and I, always asking questions. Secondly, you have people who are ideators, the ones who are always finding solutions, but sometimes they get bashed over the head because they have too many solutions and there are too many problems. And we prefer to look at the problems instead of looking at the
Okay.
solution. So
I'm a
you're an
solution
ideator
oriented.
too.
I like to fix everything.
You're an
Food
ideator
fixer.
too. That's why. So that's probably your preference. You and I probably have the same preferences. These are assessments. They're tests you can take, 30 questions, less than 5 minutes. And it's really interesting because it gives you a map and it helps you understand where people are coming from. The third cognition is the developers. The developers are the ones who are like the project managers. They put all the pieces together, they'll clear everything out, they'll make sure that and then finally it's ready to go. And then you have the implementers, the go do it people, the Nike people, just do it. Now, that is a cognition. So in communication, we tend to communicate according to our cognition. So you and I may be really excited about the ideas, but we want to ask the questions. And then perhaps there are other people on our team who are really good at putting the project together and then, taking it out there and taking it to market. That's the one way of understanding our communication skills. On the other hand, this is also a process. So in our thinking skill set, we can say, okay, right, so I'm writing an email to somebody new. I'm pitching a new client. The first thing I need to do is to clarify. Who am I? What is this about? What do we want to achieve? Why am I reaching out to you? Instead of perhaps just going directly for the end result. And you will get, so
Right.
there is a process. You can clarify, you can ideate, and then you can develop, and then you can implement. So all this is one of the process tools that we use. It helps you communicate in a more effective way. And then there are other kind of tools you can use, including emotional tools, because we need to take that into consideration, being sensitive to the pulse of that person, knowing how to read between the lines, knowing how to value decode of those 10 things that person told me, which are the 3 most valuable assets that I can stay with, that I can run with, and I can feedback with. And then it becomes a real process in terms of it becoming an acquired skill. So communication, whether you're in food, whether you're in government, or whether you're with your boyfriend sitting on the sofa, is really important. And depending on the cognition, sometimes you realize you're not speaking the same language. So here is somebody who really wants all the detail. When did it happen? Why did it happen? Did you ask this? Did you ask that? And the other one is, why are you asking me all these questions? And it can create conflict. And it's not, it's just that this person has that cognition.
Right.
And the other doesn't have the same level of that cognition, or doesn't practice it, and they feel attacked. And it's not an attack. So you understand, when you understand about people and process,
Right.
then all of a sudden you can map everything out, and everything is a lot more respectful, tolerant, fluid.
Essential Ingredients is powered by NextGen Chef. NextGen Chef is a movement that supports food and beverage entrepreneurs around the world by fostering a sense of community and providing its members access to mentors and a wealth of resources and guidance. NextGen Chef feeds members with the knowledge they need to build better for you food and beverage businesses so the world can have greater access to healthier food, comprehensive food education, and increased affordability. If you like what you hear on this podcast, continue the conversation or ask new questions on the NextGen Chef app, available in the Apple Store and Google Play. Follow NextGen Chef on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at NextGen Chef. Join NextGen Chef and let's change the future of the food industry together.
Oh yeah, it resonates with me immediately because I can see myself doing that. And I'm not attacking anybody, but I am curious and I do want to know. And the only way I know how to respond better is to ask those questions so that I could then curate the way that I either do something or behave, or it allows me to change my behavior, right? Or respond better or in a more informed way. But equally, if somebody else finds that attacking, then what do you do?
Well, what you can say is, hey, listen, I'm a clarifier, okay? So it's just the way I'm made. I dropped into a mold, and I use this all the time with my friends who now know about this. Donna, why are you asking so many questions? Because I'm a clarifier. This is the oldest church in the village. Wow, great. When was it built? Don't you believe me? Why are you asking me that question? No, it's just so one of your values, and that's why values are important, is curiosity. Another of your values is the love for discovery. So it may not be somebody else's value, so they don't recognize. So between understanding value decoding and understanding how communication and brain processes work, you've got a real, hot ticket there for being able to present yourself as you are and having others try to understand it. Now, when you're in a group and everybody understands where everybody's coming from, then it's a different story. It's suddenly you can relax because everybody's just different. And that's wonderful. Then you can use everybody's different skills to create a nice big paella of communication. That's what I like to say, cooking ideas. I use a lot of metaphors connected to food because this is what we're doing. Food is creative. Food is alchemy. Food is inventing where there isn't. That's creative. Very often you have one lost tomato and 3 different kinds of herbs and a bit of olive oil, and it's a banquet because you've used the resources you have and you've suddenly created something new. So it's totally up my street in my creative world. Totally. I use that metaphor a lot.
I like
And
that.
if you don't look after your creative skills, they die like a plant.
Well, and I think that it's really important, especially for the founders and the food entrepreneurs that are listening today to this podcast, because that's who we're talking to, right? We're talking to these founders and these entrepreneurs that are building these businesses and are learning how to talk to each other, to build their business, build teams, and need to be able to hone in on their skills and be able to talk to their team members and other entrepreneurs that they're dealing with. So this is a really important skill that they need to be able to build and to tap into. So I'm so excited to be able to share this information with them. So as they're planning their future, and I know that they're talking about how to build their businesses, what are some of the resources and tools that you employ for building future projects, thinking about the trends that are coming down?
Yeah. Well, that's a really important question, because this is something I suggest to anyone, everyone, and any kind of business. I have 2 definite processes that or acts of governance that I always recommend. One is creating a future trends observatory in your organization. Whether you're 1 or whether you're 500, doesn't matter, future trends. And another one is having an ideas lab. And you can have these on your computer, they can be filed. So it's like having vaults that you can access to be able all of a sudden, like your ingredients, you have to open your cupboard. What do you have there? It's where you can really gain a lot of value added, and most more than anything else, have competitive value. So with regards to future trends, which, as you know, is one of my key elements in my business, there are different platforms I use to be able to scan for future trends, because this is like being something I always have here. It's also my reference. I always have my little lighthouse here. My lighthouse is my reference. So this is what you're doing. You're scanning the environment, both for your creativity and also for future trends. I use resources like, for example, World Economic Forum. I use resources like United Nations, because they tend to be on the ball with regards to what's happening around the world. I use resources like Fast Company, for example, newsletters that I scan, or newspapers that I get every week, and I'm scanning through them and highlighting all the new trends. And then I start to archive them. There are trends which are social. There are trends which are business trends. There are trends which are innovation trends. There are leadership trends. There are all kinds of trends. In fact, one of the first books I read on trends was around about 1991, a book by Faith Popcorn. She was the first futurist. And that book was called The Popcorn Report. And Faith Popcorn is still around. She was a woman, female futurist. When you think of futurist, you think of perhaps Nikola Tesla, who is obviously way beyond his time, or you think of Thomas Edison, or you think of Henry Ford, or nowadays you may think of Elon Musk, you know, people who are visionary, they're looking far down the future. But somebody who's creative is essentially a futurist, because somebody who's creative is always thinking of better ways of doing things. So creativity and futurism, like they're like two hands of the same body. They're two things that need to be taken into consideration. So I obviously research all these different kind of trends. I'm privy to it. My students send me trends. My colleagues send me trends. I'm picking it up from LinkedIn very often. I scan them. I have a WhatsApp group to myself with all my trends. So that's called my future trends list. But and then you are often the one who uses, I always suggest that you use these future trends as a catapult to be able to foresee your own future. So if you think of Jeff Bezos from Amazon, the way he started was he, in a little article in the newspaper, in his local newspaper, he saw a trend. It said, internet sales will go up by 200% over the next 5 years. That's all. And that triggered his whole Amazon business. That triggered his bookstore. And after that, it was from here to eternity and back. So, you know, having that antenna up, you know, and having this lighthouse idea up, in terms of being aware of trends, obviously, I know you're very much on the board with regards to trends. I've listened to some of the podcasts. I know you've been talking about, you know, the new kind of fabricated meats or plants, and I know you're interested in this. And we shared some information the other day on food trends in 2030. But even the other complementary trends could be of use to your entrepreneurs. For example, the trend of growing your own food. So it occurs to me as a creativist, as a CreACTivist, it occurs to me then if people are going to be growing their own food, hey, perhaps it would be a really interesting trend. I've seen this already. I've seen a London restaurant do this, that have a little orchard at the back, and everything in their restaurant is therefore homegrown. You know, this homegrown
There's a variety
business.
of restaurants that are doing that now in New York and California, etc., where they make their own garden.
It's great. And for example, something that may be interesting for your viewers is that in Spain, there's a huge food culture, as you may very well know. Over here, food is really important. You spend a longer time talking about food than about the business. So, you know, food is a big deal. But up in the Basque Country, which is the northern part of the country, they're the kingpins of food. Over there, it is considered, you know, it's considered ungracious not to accept a business meeting food, you know, encounter. And I tend to skip because I'm always in a hurry. I like to eat in the evening when I'm calmer. But if I have to be thinking, I can't be spending 3 hours eating and talking. It gets in my way. I love food, but in my right time. But for them, this is, and they will remember me at the restaurant. Oh, this is the lady who didn't eat last time, isn't she? You know, it's like a big deal. I have to wear it gracefully because I have poetic license because I'm a foreigner. So I get away with it, and I'm, you know, a CreACTivist. But they have something called chocos there, TXOSOS, chocos. And chocos was a community traditionally of men who used it to get away from the matriarchal society, because there's a real matriarchal society there, where on Sundays, they would all bring their produce, they would hire a farmhouse out in the country and do their cooking and just enjoy their cooking. And those chocos became such high value things that they became clubs. And you paid good money to become part of that club. Because all the people who came, they all knew about food. These would tell, these are the connoisseurs, the latest wines, the latest food, everything exquisite, everything in its place. In recent years, they've started accepting women in these choco clubs, and that is a real novelty because traditionally it was gender specific. But the idea of chocos, even from culture, you can pick up ideas that could be in some form. It could offer what I think today is going to be of great relevance: authenticity as a value in business. Authenticity meaning, you know, respecting people and nature, respecting the other, having a sense of integrity and authenticity in a fake world,
Right.
in a world full of false truths, is something really relevant. So how can I jump the gun into the future? How can I be the one setting the trend? Not only because I know what's happening around me and I can pick from here and there, but perhaps I recognize something somewhere and I run the trend myself. So the point of futurism, or futurology, as I like to call it, is not only to be aware of what's coming, so you're not caught with your pants down, like many are in businesses,
Right.
but for you to ideally connect the dots with your creative skills and create trends yourself and become the trendsetters. And food is a big deal. It's at the front of the spearhead. What are people worried about today? They're really worried about this. You know, restaurants are closed in many parts of the world. It's so people are having to learn how to cook. Oh, maybe there's an opportunity there. Yeah. People are having to learn how to choose more wisely. People are having to realize that food affects their longevity. This is a whole new playing field that we're playing with here. And I think there's a great opportunity for foodies and entrepreneurs from that kind of business to really make a difference, not only for their pocket, but for everybody else's well-being. So it's a win-win situation just yet.
So we'll just go through like 2 more questions because I know you got to run. Is that okay?
Yes,
Um,
please.
okay. So, we're just talking, we'll talk about the future. I just want to just tap into how COVID has impacted your ability to create social impact, because I'm sure that it has, or maybe it's actually had a positive impact. Because I know for me, actually, I've turned COVID into, I think, a positive thing.
I love that. I love that.
So, I know people have had a lot of it's without it goes without saying it's had negative impact, but I feel on a personal level, I've been able to turn it into a positive thing for my business and for my ability to have a social impact. But, I turn it to you not because I don't think you could have had a negative, it could have had a negative impact. I think it could have a negative or positive impact. So,
Well, I
um,
think where you're coming from there again, I think it's value recognition. It has to do with attitude, as an ideator, problem solution. There's your story, problem solution. So people who have this kind of training and this kind of cognition, it's a lot easier. I always say, change is it's an intrinsic part of humanity, of our evolution, of our very life. You're not born, you don't die a baby usually, and I say that,
right.
with a certain tongue in cheek. Usually there's a process of evolution before we finally kick the bucket. We kick the bucket. But I agree with you. For me, when I started, with the COVID impact, and incidentally, I was in the States when that happened. I almost got caught in Los Angeles, and I was supposed to be flying back, and they, stopped
Right.
all the airlines from flying. My friends were a little bit panicky at that time, but then I said, listen, you know what, well, let's just wait and see, wait a couple of days, and then, I'll think about making my way back. And that's what happened. There again, it's attitude. You can either really panic or say, wait a bit, let's just check this out first.
Right. Yeah.
And with COVID, what I turned it into something else. I took the name COVID, and I realized that the word COVID actually has 2 really nice words. One is co,
Right.
which for me symbolizes co-creation, collaboration, and contribution, and vid, which on the one hand means wine, and on the other hand is short for vida, wine, which means life, co-vida. So I've turned it into that aspect of more co-vida. How can we better co-create? How can we better collaborate? How can we better contribute?
Right.
So for me, at the beginning, obviously, it was a very interesting experience because I was obliged to slow down and to sit in my garden for longer spells than I usually do, and that was great. But on the other hand, what it's really triggered in terms of social and business impact is being in touch with so many more people, creating so many new business ideas, and really being involved, obviously because of Zoom, with so many more people, that if this hadn't happened, I would have met you to start with.
Right.
You're right. So that has been important to me. Now, what I do miss is the energy of the real hug. The social distancing business is something that for me has been very detrimental emotionally, because you know, I like to hug my friends, and I
Right.
like to be with my students, and I like to look you in the eye, and I like to be in your energy field. So
Right.
that, yes, it has been detrimental.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also miss seeing my family and the fact that they're not close by. And I feel,
Yeah,
they're isolated
yeah,
because my father lives in New York by himself, my mom in Florida. And so, that to me, I think has been the
yeah.
big
That's tough.
challenge, just
That's
because I
very
feel
hard.
for them that
Yeah,
they're by themselves.
yeah,
And while I'm a social person, I'm fine. I don't live by myself. I'm, and I feel I have my dogs, for those of you that are watching the video, here's one, you know.
hey, what's his name? Your little dog.
I have two little dogs.
What's his name, this
This
one?
is Minnie.
Hey, you're kidding me. I had a cat called Minnie, and she was 18 years old. She just passed away last Christmas.
Oh, I had a cat named Chili. No, I'm sorry, Shibumi, who was 18. I did have a cat named Chili when I was a little girl. And Minnie and Shibumi passed away when she was 18 too, when we were living in Mexico City.
Wow.
Oh, it's such a long time we have these animals
Oh, I
too.
was heartbroken, huh? I was
I
heartbroken
did.
for 3 days. It took me for 3 days. I was
2 days.
weeping.
I
But
had like
even now,
months. I mean, I
uh,
still get a little weepy, and it's been a few years.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
do know that I want to, be respectful of your time because we are
Thank
coming
you.
up on it, and just close out and for you, for our followers. But just I want to just ask you, at Essential Ingredients, we focus on the future of food and beverage, and the hospitality industry is adjacent. And are there any learnings in the hospitality industry that you think our food and beverage entrepreneurs, our better for you food businesses can apply?
Well, I had to think around that question, and I would say that probably the best thing they can apply is a very systematic approach to creativity and future trends rather than the hotel industry, because the hotel industry is being fast taken over by other options.
Mhm.
So, you know, in life and in business, we know that there are some which are pillars and they'll be there forever and ever. Amen. Hotels are hopefully going to be there, but I think that a lot of their management systems are going to change. And amongst others, they're all going to start speaking the language of creativity. The 21st century language is creativity because it crosses barriers. It does wonders for your synapses, and that's where you find your supernovas. So my recommendation is that they follow that rather than just that industry, which, as you know, I also come from. But it's always been my flagship, the idea of creativity, and now even more so the idea of, you know, being on the board with regards to future trends. What I would like to say as famous last words is a yogism. Yogi Berra was one of your famous baseball players, and he came up with an amazing amount of quotes. Like, for example, "It ain't over till it's over." Okay, so it ain't over till it's over is a yogism. But one really good one he had was, "The future ain't what it used to be." Okay, so all you guys out there, the future ain't what it used to be, and therefore you're going to make it better. You're going to make it better for yourselves and for others, because we are now in a phase of metamorphosis where it's a brand new ball game. So, you know, thanks to all you wonderful food entrepreneurs that are driving our well-being, our joy, our interaction, our communication, thanks to all this food and beverage that we enjoy, both at home and outside. So people like you are important for this well-being of this new human that is being born as we speak, because we're moving into a new epoch, a new era. So thanks to all you guys and to you, Justine. And I'm very happy to have become privy of your little club here. And I look forward to learning more about food and everything you're sharing, because it's extremely valuable.
Well, Donna, I really appreciate you sharing this, because one of the really important things for me to share with our founders is not just the information so that they can make more informed choices to build better for you food businesses, is how to build more sustainable regenerative businesses.
Yeah.
And part of that is giving them access to the information they need to build those skills. And to nurture those businesses so that they are regenerative and sustainable, not just the food, but the businesses. So thank you for helping me embark on that journey. So I'm really grateful because this is just the beginning of that journey as well. So I really appreciate it. And I want to thank our listeners.
All the very best, all the very best. You're over to you. Thank you. I'm sorry I have to rush, but I'm afraid I have a schedule and I need to get on a train.
No worries. I just want to thank our listeners for joining us and let them know that if they like this, they should subscribe to our podcast, Essential Ingredients with Justine. It's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on any of the channels you like. And for those of you that are listening, please do join the Next Gen Chef app. It is complimentary. And so if you're listening here, please download the app, connect with us there. It is a free app. It's a great community, has lots of special content. And we are inviting you this week special to be part of the Kickstarter mentorship program. There's lots of other free content and special mentorship programs available on this app. So don't hesitate, jump on over there. It is a free app right now, and we look forward to seeing you there soon. So again, thank you, Donna, for joining us, and we look forward to speaking with you all here next Tuesday for the next podcast. To find out more about this episode of Essential Ingredients and access show notes, check out Next Gen Chef and choose podcast in the menu bar. If you like this episode, head to iTunes or Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel to subscribe. Learn more about Next Gen Chef, the platform that powers this podcast, by checking out our website or visit us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Next Gen Chef. You can also check out my Instagram at Justine_Reichman. If you have thoughts about this episode or future episode ideas, leave us a comment at Next Gen Chef's YouTube channel or drop an email at team@nextgenchef.com. Thanks for joining us.